In 1913, South Africa passed a law that would change the country's history for generations, the Natives' Land Act. At the time, Black South Africans made up the majority of the population, yet the law severely restricted where they could own and occupy land. The act designated certain areas for Black South Africans and prohibited them from purchasing or acquiring land in many areas reserved for white ownership. Only about 7% of South Africa's land was initially designated as African reserves, despite Black South Africans making up the vast majority of the population. For thousands of families, this meant losing access to land they had farmed, lived on, or depended upon for generations. The consequences were not only social, but also economic. Many Black farmers were pushed away from productive agricultural land and had fewer opportunities to build wealth through property ownership. Some people were forced to move, while others became tenants or workers on farms owned by white landowners. The law also contributed to the growth of overcrowded reserves and increased dependence on wage labor. Although the Natives' Land Act was not yet the full apartheid system, it became one of the most important foundations for the racial land policies that followed. Over the following decades, further laws expanded racial segregation and strengthened restrictions on land ownership and movement. The impact of the 1913 Land Act continued long after its introduction and remains closely connected to South Africa's modern land reform debate. The law was eventually repealed in 1991 during the transition away from apartheid. More than a century later, the legacy of the 1913 Land Act can still be seen in South Africa's unequal patterns of land ownership. It is remembered as a turning point that transformed land from a question of property into one of the country's most enduring political and social issues.